In tonight's story, betrayal runs deep, but revenge runs deeper. You're listening to Revenge with Jack, where justice always finds its way. Not tonight, Marco. I have a headache. The words had learned the hallway by heart. They slid under our door, lay in the blankets, and slept where I used to sleep. I'm Marco Alvarez, 34, shift supervisor at Hallard Design in Phoenix. I count hours and parts for a living. Lately, I've been counting silences. Elena sat at the vanity, brushing her hair like she was smoothing a story flat. She kept her eyes on the mirror, but not on me. 3 months of turning away. 3 months of guest room sheets that smelled like detergent and distance. The woman I married would pull me close when I got home, oil and dust still on my sleeves. Now her shoulder flinched under my hand, like a bird startled by shadow. Elena, we need to talk. About what? The brush paused, then clacked too quickly against the glass top. About us. About whatever this is. For a breath, I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear, or a room she didn't want me to open. Then the smile dropped over it. Practiced. Kind enough to bruise. Nothing's happening, Marco. I'm just tired from work. She was still a receptionist at Glenfield Electric. Same desk, same elevator that groaned when the doors closed, same roster of names on the directory. Routine had been our weather. Lately it felt staged. You've been tired for 3 months, I said. She shrugged. I made an appointment with Dr. Salazar next week. Maybe I need vitamins. I nodded like agreement could hold a house together. But something cold settled in my chest, slow and heavy. The answer sounded memorized. A line read to an audience that already knew the ending. That night, I lay awake, counting her breaths in the dark. They were deep, even, unreachable. When did she stop talking in her sleep? When did her dreams move to a room I didn't have a key for? Downstairs, the kitchen clock kept polite time. On my nightstand, the anniversary mug, world's best husband, faded at the edges like it didn't want to make promises anymore. At 6 the next morning, I found her in the bathroom, bent over the toilet. She didn't hear me on the stairs. Elena. She straightened too fast, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. You scared me. Are you sick? Something I ate. That Chinese place. We'd shared the same containers, the same soy sauce packet. My stomach was a flat C. She brushed past me in her work blouse, already ironed. I need to leave early. Big client meeting. Glenfield wasn't that kind of office. It never had been. In 5 years, she'd never once said a client's name. She grabbed her purse and keys. The front door clicked, soft as a secret. I stood at the sink, hands around my mug, heat pressing into my palms. Outside, the roses in our yard lifted their faces to a sun that asks no questions. Inside, I felt the hinge of our life shift. Something was wrong. Every instinct said so. But I work with machines. I don't fix them by guessing. I needed proof. I needed to breathe without breaking anything. I told myself patience is love with its sleeves rolled up. I had no idea how much work was coming. We met under borrowed lights. My cousin Diego's wedding. A backyard strung with paper lanterns that hummed like soft moons. Elena laughed at something my tia Berta said. A laugh with edges that curled upward, and I felt the tug that pulls a man across a room without asking permission. We danced to a ranchera my mother loves, her hand small but certain in mine. The band was off-key, the punch was too sweet, but the night had its own math. Step, sway, promise. Our courtship was simple the way good bread is simple. Drives up to Sedona when the red rock blushed at sunset. Greasy paper bags of tacos on the tailgate. Silence that didn't need rescue. She was 26, finishing her business degree and learning the commute of adulthood. I was 29, already wearing a supervisor's badge at Hallard Design, counting overtime as investment, not sacrifice. We were the kids of people who worked with their hands. Her father managed a small auto shop in Tucson. Mine swung hammers for 3 decades. We both believed in calendars and receipts, in paying things off, in owning a key and a Saturday. We married at St. Bridget's, the little cathedral with cracked pews and stained glass that bled color onto our shoes. She wore my abuela's pearls and cried when the priest said the word keep. Family crowded 3 pews in the aisle. Cousins' kids rattled programs like tiny fans. We didn't have a string quartet, only a cousin with a guitar and a throat full of hope. It was enough. The Maple Street house came in our 3rd year, a slab of stucco and shade that my father called good bones. He taught me where to tap a wall to hear the truth. We planted roses out front, Elena's idea, and I built her a shed out back with a door that didn't stick. We hung wind chimes that remembered every storm. We talked about children in the future tense like travelers sketching a map. Not yet, but soon, after she got her footing at Glenfield and I finished retooling my line. We were not in a rush. We mistook calm for permanence. Then the small drifts began, the kind you only notice when you're sweeping. Dinners postponed. Diamondbacks tickets scotch-taped to the fridge until the ink bleached to nothing. I'm working late, first once a week, then twice, then with the rhythm of a habit. When I tried to tell her about a new hire who kept misreading torque specs, she nodded at a point behind me. Her phone began sleeping face down like a trained animal. New blouses, sharper heels, price tags that didn't speak Glenfield wages. Once she came home carrying someone else's scent, cologne like cedar and claim. Elevator was crowded, she said, like that explained shoulders. I kept telling myself people change under pressure the way metal does. Heat, shape, cool. But metal remembers, even if you can't see it. Love does, too. By then, the roses had learned drought without dying. I envied their quiet. It's strange how a single name can tilt a room. That Wednesday, Elena said it as casually as turning a page. Shared the elevator with David from the warehouse. She offered, slipping off her shoes, placing them heel to toe like obedient animals. The scent on her blouse wasn't fluorescent tube office air. It was a forest I'd never walked through. Cedar, a little smoke, the claim of someone who wants to be remembered. Glenfield Electric doesn't have a warehouse. I know because I've stood in their lobby under a fluorescent hum, dropped off her forgotten lunch, watched the receptionist's desk, her desk, hold a neat kingdom of pens and appointment cards. 12 employees, 2 conference rooms, 1 accounting closet, 0 forklifts. The lie was small, almost elegant. But a good machine doesn't fail all at once. It hums oddly first. I didn't challenge her. I filed David like a mislabeled part and waited to see where it would jam the line. The rituals of distance multiplied. She used to meet me at the door and tug my collar like she was syncing our clocks. Now the door clicked behind her, and she moved first to the sink, washing already clean hands. At dinner, wine became water. I'm trying to cut back, she said. She stared at the glass like it owed her something and chose not to pay. Her stomach, once careless under my palm, learned a new posture, protected, a hand that drifted there as if called. In mornings, the bathroom fan ran longer. Steam, the soft cough, the pause. Bad takeout, she said again. I nodded, the way men nod when they don't want to prove themselves right. At Hallard, I'm paid to notice patterns before they break. Heat signatures on a bearing, a tremor in the press that means the tolerance is slipping. At home I saw the same math. Client meeting became the new season, arriving twice a week, then 3. We're expanding, she said, eyes too bright, like someone describing a vacation they haven't booked. She never said a client's name. She never brought home a folder or a story with edges, the kind that gives a day weight. I started tracking the quiet data. How often the guest room sheet was freshly laundered. How her phone lived face down, then face down on silent, then face down in her purse like a cat that doesn't know this house. How she changed her passcode and laughed it off. Work policy. I kept my face practiced, my voice gentle. If a problem wants you to shout, better to whisper. That night she said she'd made an appointment with Dr. Salazar for routine tests. She even spun the word routine like sugar into something harmless. I told her I could drive, and she said not to bother. It's at lunch, she smiled. I'll be quick. I could feel the scaffolding now, the way a story holds itself up with borrowed beams. Somewhere under it, the truth waited, solid, unpretty, indifferent to our vows. I put my hand on the table between us, palm open, like I was offering her the simplest lever. If something's wrong, I want to help. Her eyes softened, and for a second I believed her pause. Then came the practiced smile, the curtain pulling itself closed. Nothing's wrong, Marco. But the room had already tilted, and the name, David, kept rolling to the same low corner, refusing to rest anywhere else. The truth didn't arrive like thunder. It came as paper. I was in the closet office one Thursday, elbow deep in folders, hunting for the fridge warranty because the compressor had started singing at night. Insurance papers slid to the side and something thin slipped free, tucked where only habit or fear would place it. A receipt, folded small enough to pass as lint. Planned Parenthood, Phoenix. 6 weeks ago. Consultation. Pregnancy test, positive. The handwriting was tidy, almost kind. Numbers have a way of finishing your sentences for you. 3 months since Elena moved to the guest room. 3 months since the word headache learned to knock. 6 weeks since she stopped tasting wine and started guarding her belly like an instinct older than language. The math didn't need my opinion. My hands went cold in that slow way metal does when shade takes it back. I sat on the edge of our bed and read the receipt again, as if reading could make it lighter. People think betrayal explodes. Sometimes it settles. It settles into your bones like desert dust, so fine you don't notice until the light catches it. I didn't throw anything. The room didn't deserve that. Her hairbrush waited on the vanity the way it always did. The mug on my nightstand still insisted I was the world's best husband in letters that had faded to a memory. I slid the paper back where I found it, crease to crease, like returning a bird to a nest it never should have built. Downstairs, the afternoon moved along as if clocks were innocent. I made coffee I didn't drink and watched the steam climb, thin and stubborn. I tried to name the feeling and failed. It wasn't rage. Rage has edges, a path, a point to sharpen. This was an open field. No landmarks. Just wind. At Hallard, you learn restraint. You don't stick your hand into a jammed press. You hit stop. You assess. You document. You plan. I decided to bring that part of me home. Not because I wanted to be clever, but because I wanted to be correct. Love makes you want to forgive first and ask later. Justice asks the opposite. Elena came home with takeout, orange chicken, broccoli beef, the comforts we give ourselves when the day's story ran too long. She curled beside me on the couch and suggested a movie like we were trying on a past that still fit. How was your day? She asked. Steady, I said. Yours? Busy. Dr. Salazar wants to run a few tests next week. Routine. Routine. The word tried on calm and looked almost convincing. I nodded, let her lean into my shoulder. Her hand drifted over her stomach without thinking. I watched the gesture the way a mechanic watches an unfamiliar noise, patient, already unscrewing panels in his head. If she was building a narrative, I'd measure it. If she was planning a reveal, I'd set a stage of my own. Not to humiliate, not even to punish. To name the thing in daylight, to keep my life from becoming a rumor told to me by someone else. I told myself to breathe, to sleep, to wait. Patience is a kind of courage we don't praise enough. It keeps you from setting fires you'll later have to put out. I had found the receipt. I had not yet found the bottom. 2 Saturdays later, I set the first piece on the board. The kitchen smelled like toast and weekend, and sunlight fell across the table in tidy squares. I've been thinking about what you said. I began, slicing my eggs with a fork I'd owned since college. About a family. Maybe we shouldn't wait. Elena went still in the way deer do when they hear the wrong twig break. The color left her face politely. She set down her fork like it might shatter. Now, she asked, voice small but careful. I thought we agreed. After my promotion. What promotion? I kept my tone soft, as if the answer could still be true if we didn't bruise it. She folded her napkin, unfolded it. Mr. Harlan mentioned possibilities. A management track. She didn't look at me when she said his name, like it was a spice she wasn't sure belonged in the recipe. I knew every name at Glenfield. I'd made a habit of it after David from the warehouse. There was no Harlan. There were 12 employees, 2 of whom had been there longer than the carpet. The lie floated between us, light but present, like dust you can see only when the sun points it out. How long, you think? I asked, wearing patience like work gloves. 6 months? Maybe more. Her hand brushed her abdomen. So slight a pianist would envy the touch. 6 months tucked neatly around a due date that didn't include me. After she left to meet Sophia for shopping, I sat in my truck and listened to the engine idle until my own breathing matched it. Then I drove to the public library on Central, where the air always smells like paper becoming memory. In the second row of computers, I opened a blank search bar and typed, private investigators near me. Then, family law Phoenix. Then, non-invasive prenatal paternity test. I read quietly, the way you read instructions for a tool you hope you'll never need, but can't afford to misunderstand. I took notes on a yellow legal pad because pens slow truth down long enough to see its face. PIs who specialized in infidelity. Attorneys who spoke about rights like they were fences that kept your land yours. Laboratories that could compare fragments of us and say yes or no in numbers that don't blink. On Monday, I met attorney Linda Park in an office where the plants looked well-watered and the diplomas had learned to sit modestly on the wall. She listened the way doctors used to, before screens. "Do you want to save the marriage?" she asked when I finished. "I want to stop guessing," I said. She nodded, slid me a pamphlet, and drew a simple timeline on a legal pad. 9 weeks for a non-invasive test if the mother consents. Birth for certainty if she doesn't. Documentation to secure assets. Steps to request testing through the court if needed. Her pen tapped at dates like a metronome. "Be careful," she added. "If there is deception, it often doubles before it dies." I walked out into the Phoenix heat with a folder that made a dry sound when I squeezed it. The sky was the same indifferent blue it had been the day I married Elena. People say the weather should match your mood. The desert doesn't do theater. It does facts. That night, Elena made beef stew and asked about my day like the past was on special. I told her it was steady. She smiled in a way that wanted to be remembered. "I love you," she said, suds climbing her wrists at the sink. "I love you too," I answered, and it was true in the way a house can still be beautiful even when you've found the crack that will one day bring it down. I was not looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth that wouldn't move when I touched it. She chose a soft lie for the weekend, one that came wrapped in sisterhood. "I'm driving to Tucson," Elena said over a bowl of cereal she didn't finish. "Sophia needs me. Things are rough with her husband." Her voice had that careful brightness people use to steer conversations on his safe shoulders. Sophia, in our life, was a college friend who sent birthday gifts and once helped pick a couch. Now she'd been promoted to sister without paperwork. "How long?" I asked. "Back Sunday night," she said, eyes on the spoon. "I'll call from the road." I kissed her cheek and tasted the kind of perfume that tries to smell like clean air. When the door closed, the house inhaled. I waited 10 minutes, then another 5, long enough for my better angels to make their case and lose. I grabbed the cap I wear to coach my nephew's little league and slid into the truck. Habit made me check mirrors twice. Fear made me check a third. Interstate 10 leaned south like a long thought. I kept 3 cars back, then 4, learning how to read her taillights the way I read gauges at work. Phoenix unspooled into flat glare and billboards, then into the ordinary seams of Tempe, stucco, Palo Verde, cinder block walls holding in dogs and secrets. She exited early, not for Tucson, but for a neighborhood with modest lawns and a shade of quiet that feels earned. Elm Street. I parked beneath a crooked mesquite, the branches sketching shadows on my windshield like a confession only the sun could read. A red pickup rolled into the driveway. He stepped out, tall, athletic, haircut with a mirror's approval. He moved with the ease of someone who's been invited. He didn't look around. When Elena climbed from her car, the careful brightness left her face. There was a softness I hadn't seen in months, a tenderness you can't counterfeit. He kissed her like they were resuming a paused sentence. My breath went shallow, hard little sips that didn't reach the bottom of my lungs. I took the first picture because my hands needed a job. Then another. Plates, faces, the number on the curb. The front door warped a little near the hinge. They went inside. I sat with the engine off and the windows cracked, desert air pushing in, hot and thin. 2 hours became a wait. A jogger passed twice. A boy dragged a skateboard by the tail like a reluctant fish. Somewhere a radio played Norteño low, accordion stitching the afternoon together. When she finally emerged, dusk had settled on the roofs. She hugged him in that doorway a second time, briefer but certain, a promise tucked into a habit. I photographed the promise, then started the truck and let the air run cold on my face until I recognized my own hands again. At home, the internet turned an address into a name. Adrian Vega, 36, contractor until recently, owner of a red pickup registered to Elm Street. Public records are dry as toast, but sometimes you can taste the salt anyway. I printed what I had and slid it into a plain folder. Paper again. The truth keeps choosing paper. Night came without ceremony. Elena texted a photo of freeway lights and wrote, "Halfway there." I didn't answer. I sat at the table, the roses outside turning to silhouettes, and understood that a map had been redrawn while I was sleeping. I had proof now not of why, not of how, but of who. It was enough to keep going. The next morning I called in sick and followed habit to a coffee shop near the university where contractors and grad students try to share daylight. Adrian arrived at 7:42, the kind of punctual that looks like hope. He wore a fresh t-shirt and the tiredness of someone rehearsing a better version of himself. I stood 2 places behind him and stared at a muffin until it felt accused. He spoke low into his phone. I caught only the drift. Couple more weeks. Tell him then. He thinks they're trying. Words floated like receipts in wind, but the ledger they came from was obvious. I stepped back to the sidewalk where the heat was already arranging itself for the day. Phoenix teaches you economy, shade, water, patience. I breathed the same 3 instructions and walked away before my thoughts could become actions I'd have to live inside. Being right doesn't mean you're ready. By noon, I was in a small office up 2 flights of squeaky stairs, meeting a private investigator named Noah Pierce. He looked like a man who preferred verbs to adjectives. He listened, didn't flinch at the parts that made me smaller, then slid a contract across the desk. You want history, patterns, paper, he said. I'll get you paper. 2 days later, he called back with the voice of a mechanic who's found more than one broken part. Adrian Vega, he summarized. Laid off from Morrison Construction 6 weeks ago. Behind on the mortgage 3 months. 2 prior domestic disturbance calls, no charges filed. 1 prior paternity case, child support in arrears. He paused, let the facts finish their own sentence. Your timeline overlaps his unemployment. I thanked him and wrote it all down even though the pen could have done the job alone. The story was crystallizing into numbers, dates, lines you could trace without lifting your hand. It didn't make the ache smaller, but it made it honest. Back home, I opened a new bank account in my name only and moved enough to keep the roof mine if a storm arrived surprise. I changed passwords, updated beneficiaries, copied documents, marriage license, title, the email where the lender had once written congratulations. I installed simple software that logged internet activity on the shared laptop because I wanted records, not guesses. If trust had to be rebuilt, it wouldn't be on sand. That evening, Elena was gentle in a way that reminded me of the year we learned each other's coffee preferences. She brushed my sleeve with her fingers and said she was making a reservation at Romano's. Somewhere special, she added, smile steady as a line drawn with a ruler. I have good news. I told her it sounded perfect. She didn't see me memorize the slope of her shoulders when she turned to the sink, the practiced ease with which she moved through familiar rooms. If she was counting down to a story, I was counting up to a nameable truth. Before bed, I stepped outside. The neighborhood hummed with sprinkler timers and quiet televisions. The roses out front held their shape like a lesson in endurance. I thought about all the men and women who go to work, pay mortgages, and share a pillow with a person they can't quite reach. There's a loneliness inside marriage we don't talk about because it feels like treason. The desert wind moved through the chimes, and the sound was small and stubborn. I wasn't planning revenge. I was assembling a map I could stand on. If pain insists on visiting, it at least owes you clarity. Romano still smells like basil and old promises. The hostess recognized us and pointed to the corner booth where we'd once argued about which city made the better pizza. Elena wore a blue dress I hadn't seen, the kind that knows how to behave under candlelight. She kept touching the edge of the napkin, folding it into a neat mountain, and then smoothing it flat. I wondered how many times she'd rehearsed her lines. I wondered how many times I'd rehearsed mine. We ordered what we always ordered, lasagna for me, chicken parmesan for her. She never reached for the bread. A soft glow sat on her face, not quite happiness, more like the idea of it. When the waiter left, she looked at me as if I stood on a threshold she'd chosen weeks ago. Marco, she said, voice bright with ceremony. I have something wonderful to tell you. I let surprise arrive slowly. What is it? We're going to have a baby. The sentence came out smooth, balanced on hope like a glass placed carefully on a table that doesn't wobble. She squeezed my fingers. I took a test yesterday. About 6 weeks. Her eyes searched my face for the man I used to be. The one who would rise, kiss her forehead, make plans about paint colors and cribs. I stood and kissed her forehead anyway because tenderness is not a lie even when it hurts. That's incredible, I said, letting the word find its own weight. When are you due? Late spring. Her smile widened. Relief flickered through it. She lifted a flute of sparkling cider the waiter set down without asking. To our future. To our future, I echoed, and clinked her glass with mine. The sound was brittle and clean. Then I reached inside my jacket and set a manila envelope between us. It made a small, dry sound that didn't belong to romance. Her hand hesitated in midair, fingers stilled as if a bird had landed there. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." She slid the photos out the way people slide letters from their younger selves, carefully, already bracing. The first shot, her on Elm Street, his hand on her waist. The second, the doorway kiss, evening making witnesses of shadows. The third, license plate, date, time. Beneath them, Noah's report, employment end date circled, mortgage arrears underlined, prior disturbances annotated in a stranger's tidy font. At the bottom, a prenatal DNA authorization form with my name and signature. A pen clipped to the paper waited like an extra hour you can choose to use or not. Color drained from her face as if a curtain had been pulled off a window at noon. The envelope slid, a photo caught in the rim of her water glass and bowed like a swimmer. "Marco," she began, voice unbuttoned, reaching for a word that might be large enough. "Can you explain 6 weeks?" I asked softly. "And 3 months of the guest room? Can you explain Romano's tonight and Elm Street last weekend? Can you explain Adrian?" Around us, forks touched plates, and a birthday song started 3 tables over. Life kept its volume. Her mouth opened, closed. An apology crowded her eyes and found no doorway. She left before the check, moving fast, purse clutched like a life raft. I found her in the parking lot sitting on the curb, the blue dress pooling at her knees, shoulders shaking in the old rhythm of a child who has fallen and knows it. Sodium lights made everything look like a memory. "I never meant," she said, face in her hands. "Which part?" I asked, and didn't raise my voice. "The affair or the theater?" Silence chose us both. Somewhere a car alarm chirped, thought better of it, went quiet. After a while I set the pen on the curb between us, the form beneath it. "We can do this clean," I said, "or we can do this loud, but we're going to do this honest." Her sobs gentled into breaths. She nodded without looking up. The night felt wider than it had any right to be. Truth doesn't arrive like a hero. It arrives like a bill, plain envelope, due upon receipt. Monday arrived with the pale light that makes kitchens look cleaner than they are. I placed Linda Park's folder on the table and signed where the sticky flags asked me to. Divorce, petition, temporary orders. The pen moved steadily, a small boat crossing a necessary river. When Elena came downstairs, eyes swollen and voice quiet, we didn't rehearse explanations. We stood in the doorway like weather passing each other. "I'll pack today," she said. "Just my things." I nodded. The word just did a lot of work. By evening, the closet had learned her absence. Empty hangers knocked gently together like a wind chime that couldn't find the breeze. A pair of flats remained beneath the dresser, left behind like an apology that missed its flight. I carried the box to her car. We didn't touch. Grief is particular about touch. Linda filed everything that week. I took the guest room, changed the sheets, opened the window to let the house breathe through the screen. My father called and spoke like men do when the topic is closeness, about tools, the Diamondbacks, a squeak in his truck that turned out to be nothing. At the end, he cleared his throat. "You're not alone, Mijo," he said, which was a way of telling the truth without naming it. "Adrian called once, a number I didn't know lighting the phone. She told me you were separated," he began, voice pitched toward reason, like we might negotiate a fresh physics. I hung up before mine could answer. There's a mercy in refusing certain conversations. Refusal keeps old bridges from pretending they're new. Time did what time does, stacked itself, quietly. The court moved in rectangles and stamps. We disclosed assets. We agreed on the house for now. I learned to cook for one with fewer leftovers. Hallard's line hummed. I let it ground me. Some nights I drove the long way home just to cross the Salt River and watch water make a case for persistence. May came the way Phoenix springs do, fast, hot at the edges. Word arrived through Linda that the baby had been born. A boy, dark hair. Elena's counsel resisted the DNA test, then relented under the language of rights that does not care about our preferred endings. In the clinic's quiet, the technician spoke kindly and rubbed a swab along the inside of my cheek. The process felt both enormous and small, like signing for a package with your name on it that you didn't order. The report returned in numbers, firm as a door that latches clean. Probability of paternity, effectively 0. Adrian Vega, father. Facts at last. I sat in my truck with the paper and watched a dust devil skate across the far end of the lot. It lifted, danced a moment, fell apart. That's how some storms look from the outside. 8 months after the decree stamped final, Elena and Adrian were done. Noah didn't need to tell me. Life did. Adrian's promises had the same backbone as his resumes. There were other women. There were overdue bills. There was the kind of noise that makes neighbors learn each other's names for the wrong reasons. One evening, Elena's number appeared on my phone. "I made a mistake," she said, voice thin with long nights. I listened to the quiet behind her, the soft fussing of the baby. Then I told her I hoped she would be okay, and set the phone down, carefully, as if it contained a live current. The house on Maple Street cooled into a place I could leave. I mowed the lawn in tidy lines and found the rhythm soothing. The roses kept trying, even as heat pressed its thumb on them. I admired their persistence and resented it a little. Healing is jealous like that. It wants to be the only thing growing. Paper had carried me through. The forms, photos, reports. But it was the ordinary days that convinced me I would keep going. Coffee, work, a clean sink, sunlight where it should be. The simple weights that anchor a life when everything flashy has failed. I sold the Maple Street place in late autumn, when the light thins and the air forgets its summer cruelty. The realtor called it cozy with potential, which felt like a kind lie. I packed the shed I'd built board by board, unscrewed the wind chimes, wrapped the pearl of our first Christmas ornament in newspaper. The roses out front had browned to paper hands. I didn't water them. Some good things deserve rest, too. My new apartment in Scottsdale is smaller, one bedroom, a balcony that faces a parking lot, and a sliver of sky that knows how to turn soft at dusk. I bought a cheap rug that doesn't pretend to be heirloom and a plant hardy enough to forgive my learning. The first night I slept there, the silence sounded different. Not empty. Unwritten. Hallard promoted me to floor manager in January. The raise is modest, the pride not. I walk the line and hear machines before they become problems. I hear people like that now, too. I bring donuts once a week and stay late when a kid needs to make a school concert. Men and women stand straighter when someone remembers they're more than a shift. My father stopped by the plant one afternoon, shook my hand as if he were meeting me for the first time. "Good bones," he said of the line, and I understood he was talking about me. Nights, I drive to Phoenix Community College and sit in the third row of processes and quality. I like the way equations stand still. I like the way a clean diagram looks like fairness. Sometimes the professor writes tolerance on the board, and I smile at the word. It means how much a thing can differ and still be itself. I'm learning my numbers. Elena settled in Tucson, waiting tables and riding buses. I don't track her, but the world is small when you've shared a mailbox. People mention glimpses, a stroller, a tired smile, a woman counting change with careful fingertips. Adrian is a rumor now, the kind that fades when rent is due. On a quiet Tuesday, she called to say she was sorry. I believed her. That's different from forgiving, and different again from forgetting. We ended our call with a soft goodbye that neither of us tried to decorate. Weekends, I take my nephew for breakfast. He dunks toast into yolk and asks brave questions. "Are you sad?" he asked once, simple as weather. "Less than I was," I said. He nodded like a man and patted my shoulder with a sticky hand. Children know more about repair than we admit. Sometimes I walk past a florist and pause at the buckets of roses. I look for the color we planted, something between red and sunburn. I don't buy any. Not yet. It isn't defiance. It's patience with myself. Joy is not a test you can cheat on. It arrives when it wants and sits where it pleases. You learn to set a place for it, and you keep the table clean. People say truth is cold. Maybe, but it is also steady. It doesn't race you down alleys or leave you stranded at intersections. It stands, patient as a door, waiting for you to turn the knob. Ordinary justice is like that. Not cinematic, not a chorus. Just a room with light in it, wide enough to breathe. I am breathing. I am learning the new shape of quiet. And in the evenings, when the sky gives up its last bit of blue, I think about the man I'm making from all this paper and light. He is not perfect. He is honest. It is enough.